He is the creator of 100 Days of Code. It's a movement that helps so many people around the world stay motivated and keep moving forward with their coding. So Alex, how's everything going with you?
Hi, everything is well with me. Everything's going really well. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Um,
first of all, congratulations on Product Hunt. A couple days ago, you were featured on Product Hunt, and you were considered the #1 product of the day with, I think, 700 or so upvotes. How many upvotes did it have?
yeah, now we're at 700 plus. Yeah, it was surprising and it was really random because I haven't considered like 100 Days of Code is not really a product. It's a product in a sense that Bullet Journal is a product. It's more like a system of how you go about doing things. It's a system of rules. So I was hesitant for the longest time to actually release it on Product Hunt. Um, but I was actually at the freeCodeCamp Toronto with my friend here. Uh, so he just suggested, um, just a sec. So he suggested just to post it for me, and that was really nice of him, I think. But just a second. Sorry. Yeah. So we posted it randomly. It was like Saturday at 12. So and for the whole day we got like 11 upvotes. So I was like, okay, at least we got the name scheduled, like taken by us. It's not somebody is gonna come up and just kind of get the spot. But when I woke up the next day, we got already more than 100 upvotes. So I was like, did I dream this? And then I understood in the morning that actually it was true. I was like, wow. And for the actual like the whole next day, I was sitting there just watching the upvotes just to make sure that we keep to be product of the day. So yeah, the friend who actually helped me with this, his name is David Diaz. You might know him. He's the creator of the front end checklist, and now
Uh-huh.
he's done the front end checklist, like performance checklist, and I think he has the design checklist, and he's gonna release some more. So he's recently moved to Toronto to kind of pursue his tech career further. Yeah, so we kind of met offline now, which is nice. He is an awesome guy. So he keeps suggesting me all of this stuff that I didn't know about. Um, and yeah, we ended up product like #1 product of the day, which I was surprised with, but I was happy. I think what also helped is that when let's say you were developing a product like an app and you have to release it on Product Hunt, then you have to create like an article describing it, like a video about it, all those kind of assets that don't exist that you have to have for the launch. But in our case, because we've been running for I don't know 2 years now, we had all of that. We had all the articles, we had videos, we had like a Slack link, everything they need. So in that sense, even Instagram, we're everywhere. So it's been pretty easy to like set it up and just forget about it because it was like fully customized. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, congratulations again on the success of the Product Hunt launch. I guess we call it launch. Did you know that it
Yeah.
was even going to go up there, or did it just appear up there one day?
So yeah, we talked with David. He's like, how are you not here? And he was the hunter, so like he hunted the 100 Days of Code, and I was the creator, so we kind of like grouped together and just he helped me put it there. Yeah, pretty much.
What was it like for for you to be a top product? I think freeCodeCamp was only the second place product when it
Oh
was
wow.
launched. Yeah, looking back, that was a long time ago, and that just totally took us out of left field. We're like, hey, why are we getting all this additional traffic? And it was like somebody's like, hey, you're on
mm,
Product Hunt, and we'd
right.
already been up there for several hours. So but yeah, like what was that like? Just did
Oh, it's
you
exciting. For me, I'm still not sure why it happened the way it did because there were a lot of products like released on that day. But also, I think it's because we kind of like did the opposite of what people are supposed to do. Like you're supposed to release it during the weekday because every weekday there's like a newsletter that gets out the next day versus on the weekend there's no newsletter, like there's no daily newsletter, right? So people optimize for a lot of things, but they end up optimizing for the same things and they release those products on like using the best practices or whatever. So I think one big part of it was that we released it randomly on a Saturday that like not a lot of people would do, especially the people who actually like plan their launch. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, Saturday, like I can tell you anecdotally, FreeCodeCamp has about half the traffic it has on a weekday on Saturday. A lot of people choose to just kick it and take a day off. I guess with 100 days of code, they're not supposed to take a day off. So maybe many of your existing people who are in the middle of the challenge decided to jump on and leave a remark on Product Hunt. So did this lead to a surge in new people?
I believe it did. Yeah, we've seen like new faces and new people on Twitter, especially because it's a different audience on Product Hunt. I think a bit of a different mindset. There's some correlation with like people who are learning to code, because there's so many different reasons you might be learning to code. But Product Hunt is more, its focus is on the making of things. So eventually, like you either graduate towards that, or you find a stable job, or you find a job. Like if you find a job at Google, for example, like and it's your first job, you wouldn't just go on Product Hunt right away and try to make your own products until you get some experience. So there's some kind of discord. So that's why I think we got all those makers that are on Product Hunt to kind of take a look and discover what 100 Days of Code is. And I've seen, because I see the retweets of the 100 Days of Code bot, I've seen, oh, like this person joined, and the bot kind of congratulates them on like joining. Oh, thank you for following me, kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about the bot, because the bot is really a remarkable success as far as Twitter bots are concerned. I understand that it recently crossed 1,000 followers. Is that correct?
I think we have 17,000 followers there for the Twitter bot. So it's pretty big. It's bigger than like my account, for example, like my personal account. I'm like, whoa. But because it brings more value to people as like my
Wow,
account. Like if you,
17,000.
yeah.
I had no idea you had 17,000 followers. That's amazing. I was thinking, like, for a bot account that
Yeah.
basically is just
It's pretty
retweeting.
successful.
That's amazing, man. Congratulations.
I
So,
think, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. My thing is the popularity of the bot is because of the value it provides, because it kind of connects you with the community instantly, kind of like compared with Instagram, which I think 3 months ago or 2 months ago they rolled out finally an ability to follow a hashtag, which is not doable on Twitter. So like it is doable in a way that you search for a hashtag and then you kind of find out the details. But what Instagram does actually, and you can, if you are on Instagram, subscribe to the 100 Days of Code hashtag, because it's just people posting stuff they're working on, and it's pretty cool. And I think Twitterbot kind of feels that niche on Twitter, where it's just impossible to kind of connect to the community unless you like follow person by person. But also, how do you find out about the new people and things like this? And also, it's not a simple bot. And thanks to Aman for creating it. You can find him at Aman himself on Twitter. And what he's done, I think he's done it in the very beginning of the creation of the 100 Days of Code like concept. And without it, I don't think we would have such a continuous influx of new people coming in, and kind of like the community sustaining itself. So it not just it like retweets people, but also it congratulates them on their success, and it kind of like tries to if they're unmotivated or if they're upset, it listens kind of to those searches, I guess, for the 100 Days of Code hashtag and their sentiments. So like if they use the word upset or sad or something, it will try to cheer them up with like a motivational quote and stuff. So and like always thanks for following, things like this. So it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of like a super simple yeah, you could say like it's a bot, but it's not just a retweeter bot, which there are so many of them. And I think even in those retweet bots, sometimes there's value. Like I follow one for Golang, for example, and it's pretty good. Like I find about the opinions of people who are just tweeting about Golang, something they like found out, or some like criticisms of it, and it's always different. Which before I was kind of like, looking at those accounts, for example, like there was one for like Angular JS. Like if you were to do anything like JS, like Angular JS bot would like retweet you. And it's not the official one, but it's just one of those that I remember. And I was like, why would I ever like follow it? Because it's kind of gonna put so many tweets that I don't care about in my feed. But I think Twitter has got really good at kind of mixing up your timeline in a really cool way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the project itself, the 100 Days of Code bot, and we're going to get into 100 Days of Code for those of you who are listening who aren't that familiar with the 100 Days of Code challenge. It's a hashtag, and there's a website, and there's a Twitter bot, and all these different aspects of it, and of course, there's a giant community. And I'm just looking at the 100 Days of Code Twitter bot actually right now, and I'm gonna drop a link to this in the notes as well. Take a look at that. How did the bot come about, and whose idea was it, and who took it and rolled with it and expanded it? I mean, I see that Aman Mittal was.
Yep.
He's been absolutely critical, and I've talked to him about it a lot in the past.
Yeah, he is amazing, and I think that's initially he had that idea of starting a bot. I was kind of having some thoughts, but it was like all very vague because I was trying to think of so many different things about the challenge to kind of like formulate it better to make it fit different use cases. But definitely Aman, I think, was the one who like he got the idea, he created it, and then just like was presented to us as that thing, like, oh, it's done already. So big thanks to him. And he also open sourced it, and there's a lot of people who have helped improve it, improve the bot along the way, as well as I think it's been that Twitter bot is a part of freeCodeCamp GitHub, so it's kind of like it's a part of freeCodeCamp. So if you're interested in kind of contributing to open source, you can look at the code, like at the code in this bot, and maybe you'll come up with like a different feature for it and things like this. Yeah. So yeah, and I think I should mention probably for the people who might just hear about the 100 Days of Code that it's a challenge in which there are two main rules. One rule is you code for minimum 1 hour a day for the next 100 days after you commit to it. And the second rule is you encourage at least 2 people on Twitter every day that are also in the 100 Days of Code challenge. You either reply to them, or you like their tweet, or you just communicate with them somehow. And that kind of puts you into the loop of things, into the community. But definitely another thing I wanted to mention is that I see a lot of misconceptions about the 100 Days of Code, how it's evolved to be now versus what I wrote in the first article. Because in the first article, I'm very specific, because I was working at a job and I wasn't super happy with the technology I was learning. So I had to find a way to consistently somehow learn web technology. So 100 Days of Code was kind of like an internal response to kind of like, I have to make it like a public commitment somehow. So we were sitting in a restaurant, that famous story, like I tell it every time. But yeah, I was just sitting and talking, like I was complaining to my wife, like every day I make that decision and every day I fail. Like I just watch something instead of doing anything. So I suggested maybe I do it for 3 months and I publicly commit. I tell everybody that I'm gonna do this. She's like, yeah, okay, but what about 100 days as opposed to like 90 days? It's kind of like doesn't sound really well. Doesn't sound really good. So after that was born the 100 Days of Code, and because of those limitations that I had in my personal story, I put all of those into the article, like, oh, you can't miss a day, you have to do minimum 1 hour a day, and things like this. But since then, so many new people kind of came into the community that I find that they read it and they're like, oh, but on Saturdays I cannot do anything, like it's my family day, for example, or oh, I can only afford like 30 minutes a day. Can I not do the challenge? Or oh, I skipped 2 days. Can I continue, or should I like restart it? And to all of those people and to all of you listening, it's very flexible. It's up to you, and you can definitely do anything you want with it. You don't have to restart it every time you like make a mistake. There's of course some ideal scenarios, and there's also your personal rules, like how you twist the rules for yourself before you start. But I suggest that if there's a certain limitation that you know of up front, you kind of write it into the rules of your challenge. So let's say you don't do any work on Saturday. Okay, that will be one of your rules. But then once you commit to it, you don't also sometimes take Sunday off, for example, just like for fun. But if it's something like you're traveling or you're sick or something, you can always pause the challenge and come back to it and continue. You don't have to like, oh, I had a cold for 3 days and I like lost my 90-day streak. Like, why? What really matters is that you keep coding every day. That's the main thing. It's like whatever gets you into that consistent um, kind of into that consistency, I would say, is what you need to do. And I also had another thought. um, oh yeah, we've talked about today about um, certain, you call it the value of death, uh, but it's for everyone to kind of understand what I'm talking about is, so you commit to 100 days, and then during those 100 days, like where is that moment where you kind of like start losing motivation, you lose traction, like what can you do to prevent that from happening? And my recommendation, I think, is if you keep tweeting every day and tweeting your progress every day, that'll keep you on track. But as soon as you take a little pause of like 3 days, 4 days, it probably means you're gonna like stop doing it for forever, unless you come back to it later. And that's the biggest, I think, because if you're constantly, and also, yeah, being a part of the community, so being in conversation with the people who are also doing the challenge, like either on our Slack, which you can find in the 100daysofcode.com website /connect. You can find all of the resources there. But as long as you keep yourself immersed into that, you're gonna do really well. As soon as you break off, that's where it fails. And I don't think there's like any difference between like 30 days or 90 days. There's no some like in certain other things. For example, if you were to immigrate to another country, there's some statistics that like after 3 months, that's where like the stress and the depression hits of actually on all levels understanding the huge shift you've made, right? And it kind of hits you like a sack of bricks. But
yeah, interestingly, on that anecdote of the moving to another country, you're someone who's lived in a lot of countries, Alex. You're originally a Russian national.
Yep.
And you've lived in Japan for a while, and now you're living in Toronto, in Canada.
Yep.
Would you liken moving to another country to that process of moving into a completely new field of really deep, challenging subject domain like learning to code?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of similarities. You're right. And it's kind of like any major change is going to make you really, really uncomfortable. And what is nice about moving to another country is that you can't really go back. Like it's not as easy as just stopping coding, for example. And I think stopping gets harder the more you do it, for example. But still, let's say I've moved here and I've paid for education, or I've lined up some work, or whatever the situation might be. It's really hard to just go back and like be like, oh, let this money kind of like go to the toilet, and things like this, and also like the ticket price and everything. So it kind of keeps you there. But I think there's some really, like, if you can do it at some point in your life, I think it's a good thing to do, because it kind of teaches you to overcome. It's not just a gradual shift, it's kind of like a quality shift in your life. It's so much different that it's like it's hard to understand unless you try it. Same with coding. I think if you first were to come into the world of coding, everything seems very foreign. Like all the terms are foreign. You don't understand pretty much anything. Everybody seems like they're on such a high level that you will never catch up with them. So, and I think a lot of people who, let's say they were in marketing or something, or they were in any other profession, and they hear about coding, they get excited and read a couple of blogs, and they decide, okay, I'm going to learn to code. What then can happen, and that's really sad is they would do it for a month, or they would do it for 2 weeks, and they're like, yeah, okay, that's very interesting, and then they kind of just like drop off and they like forget about that. That's what I think 100 Days of Code can fix for you if you are one of the beginners, if you want to get into coding. It kind of like, it's a contract that you like sign with yourself to, okay, for this amount of time at least I'll give it like a fair shot. And you don't expect, let's say you're starting to learn French, or you start to learn, I don't know, Korean language. You don't expect in a month that you'll understand everything, or even like a little bit beyond the basics. But people have that illusion with code sometimes. They're like, oh, like I just don't get this. Like after 2 weeks, like I've spent a month on this, I still don't get it. And like people can
Right.
spend like 20 years and they don't get some certain like parts of it, right? It's all, and it's layered. I think it was one of your articles or one of your podcasts I was listening to, and or maybe a Code Newbie interview, and it was eye-opening to me. At least at the time, it was like a year ago or so. You were talking about how coding is so multi-layered, and then it's almost equally difficult to do something like systems programming, like closer to the metal, as it is to do something that's very abstract. That's, even though it seems to beginners and like me, it seemed that, oh, that stuff is like unlearnable. I should be like okay with doing at least this kind of stuff, like some JavaScript, but I should never go into that. Like it's even more difficult. But I think it's not more difficult, it's just differently difficult. It's a different kind of area. It's kind of like if you were to learn and study astronomy, or versus like, I don't know, something like microscopic. It's just different areas of it. So if you're a beginner, and that's another I think misconception people have, is that you must learn a certain thing, like you must learn web development and that'll be your career if you're not a CS major. But no, you can get into the field by learning web development because it's the fastest way and there's the most resources available. But you are allowed to like look around and do other stuff as well.
Yeah. And one of the things I tell people who are starting with freeCodeCamp, for example, is like, this is a good place to start. It's a good foundation, learning how the web works, learning how to build basic web apps that you can share with your friends easily. They don't need to install anything. They can just go to a URL and check it out. It's a good way to get feedback and learn some basics. And then if you want, you can go learn how to write your own compiler or your own operating system, or all those classic kind of computer science projects that people would do if they were doing like a doctorate in computer science or something like that. There's nothing stopping you. But so 100 Days of Code, one of the big objectives is just to keep people motivated, and it serves as a commitment device to prevent them from kind of fizzling out 30 days in.
Yeah, going off the rails. Yeah.
Right. So it's a way to capture them when they're enthusiastic early on and they've got that initial burst of motivation, and lock it in for the following 100 days. So
I think, yeah, go ahead.
So how do you go about getting people to actually commit to this? If somebody were listening right now and they wanted to, they're just starting coding and they're really enthusiastic now, but they know that as they have failing tests and error messages and all that, their enthusiasm may wane a little bit.
Right.
How can they commit to something like 100 Days of Code and force themselves to power through the setbacks?
All right. So there's a couple of things. First thing I've talked about already, so I won't spend too much time on it, is the community. It's very important. Then other ideas I have for this kind of stuff is, first, you have to immerse yourself into not only the successes of other people. Like if you follow this like coding stars on Twitter only, you'll kind of have a skewed perception of what coding is. And also, I would suggest find and read stories about people who already learned to code, and especially stories of people who have learned to code on their own, because you'll see the common themes, and you'll see that it's not just you, like, and you're not dumb and you're not like stupid. And because these are all the fears that people are getting, and they're like, oh, I've hit this error, like I don't know what to do with it. But usually with time, at least I found this for myself, um, you even you start responding to error messages differently. You're like, okay, like this is what it says, what can I do with it? And you find out what it says. Usually it's your solution. It's not as scary. So if something is failing, is not is it's like, I guess 99% of coding is your tests failing, your coding is failing. Like once it works, it's done. Like there's no like, unless it's like a build out of an app or a website, you're just like building stuff out, kind of like fleshing it out. You get that feeling of mm, I don't know, the momentum. But also they're part of like another more important part of coding is that once you've like build the skeleton, is to fill it in with like some meat and some content. And this is usually where the problems happen, and it's absolutely fine that they do. um, that's another point. And the third, kind of what 100 Days of Code can do for you, or other things like this, is elimination of decision making in terms of what do I do daily. Like your habits should never should a habit be a decision. Like it the beauty of committing to something for longest, like for a long period of time with having a plan, is that you commit once, and you like with spend a day in frustration or maybe a week in frustration and learning about the sites, you get excited and you make that commitment once. But then it's not like every day you have to wake up and, oh, should I code today, should I not, maybe. And this is me and the exercise. Like that's why I can't really exercise properly, because I don't have a plan, and I'm like always, and I see that in myself, right? So I try to like be self-aware of this. But that's what fails for me, is that for me, it's every time I have to make that decision, and every time I can rationalize myself out of it. But if it's not something you rationalize, you just sit down and like put your hands on the keyboard and you just start typing something. That's kind of what it is. And I think we talked about before the call, we talked about the book recommendations. So I don't have it with me. I have a lot of books today that I'm gonna show, but the ultimate one that I really like, I've given to my boss to read. It's The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and it's my absolutely favorite book, because I think there's so many, and it talks about the struggle of a creative person to create art. And in our case, the art is code. In the case that's presented in the book, he talks about writing, but it also applies to everything else. And it talks about the resistance and how basically the common themes of any struggle to produce something new. So that's a book I would definitely recommend you read, and it'll give you a different perspective on like all those struggles that you feel like, oh, it's bad. It's not bad. It's just, it's hard.
Yeah, and I can second that. That's one of my favorite books. It's, procrastination seems like a pretty innocuous problem. It's kind of almost a joke, like, oh, I'm supposed to do my homework. I'll just do it all at the last minute, because then I have that time pressure. It's all good, But that's not particularly healthy. But what's even worse is when you're depending on your own effort and there's no external pressure to tell you you have to get up and do this. You really have to rely on habits and self-discipline and things like that to make sure things happen. And in your current job, there's a very good chance that your boss will be perfectly happy for you to stay focused on your work and doing what it is you do, rather than learning an entire new skill set and probably getting a job somewhere else, or changing to a different department with the company or something like that. So if anything, you have negative reinforcement to actually sit down and develop this new skill set. What are some of the other books you've got there? I'm really curious to see these.
Oh yeah. So which one should I start with? So I'll start with the ones I haven't like fully read. I think I've read like 60% of each of those. I'm planning to finish them. It's Make It Stick. It's a really good book, taking like the latest discoveries in neuroscience and applying them to learning. And one of those things is like that rote memorization doesn't work, and like rewatching, that's what I'm taking from it, is like rewatching tutorials doesn't really work, or like relearning the same things over and over. I would rather like go and try different resource, and things like this, and like rereading. Especially I was when I was starting to learn to code, I would copy everything, like on Code Academy, for example. I would copy like the whole things and like save them like in my Evernote so that I would like read it later, but I've never read it. And it was like just taking my time. So, and Mindset is a really, really important book. If you think that your like brain capacity or like intellectual capacity is limited, it's not. It's just, it's a fluid concept. And as you like strive more and you try harder on like working on complex things, your intellect will like go up pretty much. And it's not that some people are smart and some people are stupid, and that's what the book kind of changes it. Like, I would definitely recommend that one. All right, so now for my favorite ones. Okay. um so Willpower is a book I've read maybe 5 years ago or so, and it was like when these are the authors. I don't know if it's visible. So it's Baumeister, Roy Baumeister, and John Tierney. And they talk about willpower being a resource that you can deplete with the more you try to exert it. And there were some really cool anecdotes there about what's his name, with the magic. I forget his name.
Oh, David Blaine.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
guy
So
is
how, like he can be insanely focused like certain weeks and have a meal plan and have a training plan and everything. And then after he's done his trick or his performance, for like next 2 weeks he's like just chilling at home and like eating chips and doing whatever he wants. And I was so surprised by that. I was like, no, I thought he was one of those people that like always they kind of like a machine. Um but yeah, that was an important book. But here to my favorite ones. This is, I think this book is kind of to blame for the 100 Days of Code. So there's a lot of ideas here. So it's called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I hope I don't I hope I pronounce his name correctly. And you see, I make a lot of like notes as I read. But some of the cool concepts in it. If I okay, explain. Is that certain habits are very hard to break because they're part of a larger, there's an illustration here, like a larger frame, which is the cue, the routine, and the reward. So you can't really, like, there are neural pathways in your brain that you've trained with so many years of doing the same thing. Like, let's say you're smoking, but you're smoking because you have a cue to smoke. Sometimes you're like, okay, you got stressed at work with some project. It's your cue for triggering of your habit of smoking, for example. And then once you smoked, okay, you got your time frame. That's the reward. You got like you got to chill a little bit. Um, and what they're saying is that you can't really stop the habit. You can only replace it with something else. So that cue, like trigger, will still happen all the time. So you can choose something else to be your stress reliever in this case. For example, you can be like, oh, I'll just take a walk instead of smoking a cigarette when I'm stressed, or have a cup of tea or something. So that's one of them. I tend to like ruin my books by writing in them. And I've read this a while ago, so I can't really. Oh, yeah, concept of a keystone habit also is amazing. It's kind of like they've done a bunch of research and they found out about the people who have changed their life in many aspects. There was, for all of them almost, there was a keystone habit that started all of that. So it's one habit that you start with and you do it every day no matter what, and you see the effects of the positive effects, and it kind of trains your brain to see other things in a similar framework. So okay, if I modify my behavior, I'm actually getting positive results. And that contradicts the mentality of instant gratification, where oh, it's nice, okay, it's good, now I'm done, I don't have to think about it, and then the payoff comes with like negative consequences. So in this case, you kind of train your brain to delay gratification, and the more you do it, the better you get at everything. So having that keystone habit, you add more to it. And I think the best example I have of that is Leo Babauta, I hope I pronounced his name correctly as well, of zenhabits.net. So he was overweight, he was smoking, he was in debt, and by at that time he was living in Guam. in the US in like 2007, I think. And so he started this blog where he would talk about habits and how he was trying to, and he made so many plans of how he would quit smoking, and many of them failed. But then, and he's like, now he says, I wish I didn't choose the hardest habit to change, but I think it taught him a lot. And that was his Keystone habit, and he started adding stuff and like getting rid of that, getting rid of his car. He's changed, or sorry, he's moved to San Francisco. He started writing books, things like this. So it's pretty nice. That's it for this book. I have 4 more, which I'm gonna talk about
Yeah,
quickly.
go ahead. Dive into it.
This is a really nice book that was recommended to me by another person at FreeCodeCamp. So we don't only talk code there, we talk about other stuff. So Slight Edge, and the author is Jeff Olson. So the book is really centered around one idea of how by changing something really slightly, like 1%, in whatever you're doing, will amass like critical effects over time. And basically each chapter covers different aspect of your life, like financial aspect, exercise aspect, all of this kind of stuff. But the main idea is it's a very simple process of identifying one thing you're doing, improving it by a minimum amount, and then seeing those effects accumulate. And I think it's a nice book. It's kind of like, it's fast to read, but it kind of like leaves an impression on you. So this is, as you can see, one of the books that have had a big impact on me. And it was recommended by Tim Ferriss in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. So there are 2 books which I always say to people, this is why I'm in Canada. Like, this is why I've made that change in my life. It's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, and The 4-Hour Workweek. And they together kind of implanted in me an idea like, oh, I could do business, I could do stuff. And it's not only limited to whatever I've been exposed to. And so I was really confident that I can follow the recommendations of Tim Ferriss. But in this case, I think it was really, really powerful. So
And
in
the
this
name
book,
of the book is the name of the book is
yeah, it's the new psycho-cybernetics. It sounds really, really weird, but it's a nice book. It's been written in the 60s, I think, and it's one of the first books that golfers used and like basketball trainers used to kind of develop mental exercises for players so that they would play better. And then it's more like, if you were to talk about like the power of thought and the power of your intention, things like this, but it's more of a practical approach to it, I think, in this book, where he kind of teaches you how to mentally imagine something before it happens, or before like the results you want to achieve. And that way your whole personality changes in response to what you're kind of envisioning. So let's say you were a student, and that's one of the examples there, a student who would do really, really bad at math. And it's, the reason is not he's dumb. It's just his self-image of, he has a self-image of someone being bad at math, because it was kind of like suggested to him over time by teachers, by family, whatever. But you can definitely cancel that influence by making kind of, so they also teach you how to do it. They teach you how to like form that self-image. And I think it's, if I'm thinking correctly, it's, the author was a surgeon, and like a what do you call it, like a plastic surgeon? Do you
plastic
have that
surgeon.
term?
Yeah,
Or
somebody
like
who
cosmetic surgery? Yeah.
yeah.
So and he was treating people who were injured during the World War II, and also some other people who were just convinced that they were ugly or something was wrong with them, like with their face. And he noticed that some people, after he's corrected their whatever it was, like a nose, for example, oh, I have a like too big of a nose, he would correct it. And some people would completely ignore that their appearance totally changed, and they would still think, oh, I'm ugly, like you made it worse, I still have the huge nose. So they, and he started thinking like, how could this be? And some people with like scars would be sometimes proud of those scars, and it would not affect their self-image, and hence their also their behavior and they're being shy of other people sometimes, as others that would just get scars during life. And some people would get them at war, for example, and they were proud of them. um, um, so he noticed that, and he kind of went along developing that concept of self-image. And definitely that's something that applies to code, where you think, oh, I'm not like good at coding, I'm not smart enough, or I'm only good for um, what do you call it, like arts and stuff like that. And it's totally different. Like arts is as complex as coding, and it is just some people have been into situations or under influence of others that have been telling them, oh, like you're not good for this, and they kind of accepted that. So now they have this like mental block, and this I think this book is a good way to remove that block if you want to kind of go forward. And two small books, but they're all by the same person, and also one of my favorites. So I'll throw them one by one. This is called Whatever You Think the Opposite by Paul Arden. And this actually influenced me to create Do the Opposite, which is like, it's still in development, but it's gonna be like an umbrella project for 100 Days of Code, 100 Days of X, and all of the other projects I'm developing, to be a framework of thinking of how you can live your life differently from the common person would. And this one is called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be. And it's also like you can see how these books are very like creative in the way they're done, but it's not the shallow creativeness of like, oh, let's just make a small book with like a bit of text and just sell it, because there are some books that look this similar way. They're like small and they're like, oh, very motivational, but this one is actually like it's gold, and it teaches you to think differently pretty much, and how you can like with Product Hunt. If I were to follow all of those best practices, we would probably not get the product of the day. Like a small example of that. And sometimes doing things differently will be much easier. And that's also explored, I think, in the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, where if you are realistic, you'll be on the same level of like playing field as a lot of other smart people who are also trying to be like trying to do something. But then sometimes you have to create your own separate category of doing things, so that you're always number one in it, and you continue to, and like you're not in no competition with anybody. Because being in a competition kind of like, it forces you to play the game of like whatever the people are doing, and you're kind of counteracting their actions sometimes. And when you're on your own, you listen to yourself. What do you want? Like if all your friends are learning to code and you just like kind of coming along, probably not the best motivation. But if you are excited about coding and your friends are excited about coding as well, but you're in this case you're listening to yourself and your own motivations, you're probably going to have a much higher chance of success. As well as like learning technology. Oh, everybody is learning React, for example, but you're really interested in, I don't know, Golang or Python, and stopping yourself from doing that actually hinders you, because that way you're like one of the people who are doing the same thing, which also can be good. But yeah, in my in my personal philosophy, I think it's always better to listen to yourself in these cases. So yeah, that's it about, yeah, I'm kind of like going on a rant.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
speaking of success, talking about kind of finding a smaller pond that you can kind of be the big fish in, so to speak,
Hmm.
rather than just trying to jump straight into the big pond and try to be a big fish there. Um, what are some success stories from within 100 Days of Code that come to mind? Because you have so many people participating in the challenge. You have,
Right.
I think, at this point, more than 1,000 people have attempted it. In fact, I
Yeah.
can check real quick. If I go to the 100 Days of Code on I think it's still under your own GitHub account, right?
Yep.
Kallaway / 100 Days of Code, and I can
Yep.
see that there have been 4,500 forks. And if we assume that each of those forks is somebody attempting the challenge, because I believe forking it is one of the steps still. Is it still one of the steps?
Yep.
So that
It's
means,
a good way to you keep your journal.
yeah, so 4,500 people have attempted this challenge. Hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people have finished at least one rotation. I know that now many people do a second rotation and a third rotation. What's a success story from within the community? Someone who went through 100 Days of Code and had a positive outcome, either while they were still in 100 Days of Code or shortly after they finished it.
So one person I have in mind is I'm gonna butcher his name, but it's Sik Hudib, and he is by the name of Syknaps on Twitter. So it's SYKNAPSE. He lives in Spain, and I think he's done 100 Days of Code twice by now, but he's found a job and he's very happy at his job. But he was a very like during his time doing the hundreds of code, he was one of the most active people on the platform. Also, I think Victoria uh, Bergquist. Also, then we have Ryan Yost, also who was also working at a full-time job while learning, and he's actually helped me with my other project, which kind of attempts to help people change other habits, called 100 Days of X. So he's been helping me with the 100 Days of Journaling, and it's kind of the same concept, but you journal every day. So we've kind of talked a lot with them, and I also like to converse with Joe Previte.
Yeah,
I'm terrible at names.
yeah, I think I'm not sure actually. I talked to him the other day though.
Right, I know. I've
Actually,
noticed
all
on
these people
Twitter.
you're mentioning, I know them because they make themselves known. They're all
Yep.
over Twitter. They're doing things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people who could just as easily be sitting on a couch playing video games, right?
Exactly.
But no, they're out there not only learning to code but inspiring tons of people to learn to code along with.
Oh yeah. And I think one of the good ways you can help others learn is just by sharing your journey and sharing your like day-to-day experiences, what you're working on, which companies you're applying to, not by name, but that you're applying to jobs, that you're like just sharing your journey. And it always has a response in people because they are interested, because they're excited for you, and also they want to explore what they can do. Let me see if I can find someone else. So obviously Eman Mittal at Eman himself, who's been doing the 100 Days of Code, and who's also created the bot for us. Then I have Meike Hankovic from Germany. She's been helping a lot. And also, I forget to mention that in what happened in this year is that we've not rolled out, but we've added different languages on the repo. So now we are, I think, at 12 different languages the repo has been translated to. And if you are on the repo, you find one of the languages you speak is missing, so you can consider adding it, and it will be a great contribution to open source on GitHub, because anybody can then use it. And I was surprised with how many people actually helped us kind of create those translations. One of the most surprising things was I was trying to find someone to translate it to Japanese, because I've been learning a little bit of Japanese way back, and for me it's like I don't know, an exciting language. And actually, a company called ProGate from Japan reached out to me with the pull request, pretty much, of everything translated to Japanese, and I was like, yes. And they are pretty much like Treehouse, where they have courses for every like programming language, I think. But it's all in Japanese. So if you know Japanese, you can use that resource. They seem to be a very interesting um, kind of website to learn from. Also, I definitely want to mention PyBytes, which are it's like a website where you can learn Python in bytes. So PyBytes. I think Bob is one of I'm gonna butcher his last name. I think Belderos. I'm just gonna find it just by my memory doesn't serve me too well. Let me find. So I found PyBites, but let me see.
Yeah, while you're looking through that.
Yeah, so they.
Oh, I was just going to encourage
Yeah.
everybody to check out. Like, I included a link in the description to the live tweets about 100 Days of Code using the 100 Days of Code hashtag. First of all, if you take a look at that, you'll notice that there are probably, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 tweets an hour using this hashtag. It's a very, very popular hashtag, and they're in all kinds of different world languages. And people are at all different stages in the journey. Day 47, day 15, day 8, day 66. So people are all kind of going through this at different rates, and they're all at different points in their journey, but they're doing it together, and other people are jumping on and replying and encouraging them. So it's really quite profound, the notion of people cycling through this repeatedly, motivated moving forward. All right, go on.
Another cool way to find out some of the stories of people is if you go to Product Hunt for 100 Days of Code. Some community members have actually posted their like reviews of the product where they told their stories of how and it's just, I think it's Product Hunt /post/100 Days of Code, all in like what is it called, kebab case. I think.
Yeah, kebab case.
Kind of similar.
Dash case. There are dashes instead of spaces. I'm gonna go ahead and add that link to the description real quick.
Perfect.
So people can read some of those there.
Yeah. So
that doesn't affect the fact that the stream's going on at the moment.
Coming back to PyBites, I found the creators is Bob Belderboss is one of the creators, and I think he's working with the Julian Seclera on this, and they've created like a course for 100 Days of Code, like where you can learn things. So as you know, 100 Days of Code doesn't have like a certain like curriculum. It has a freeCodeCamp curriculum as a like, but it doesn't have content. So people often ask me like, what should I do for my 100 Days of Code? Like, is there a plan? I'm like, yeah, just go to freeCodeCamp, and that's the plan. But otherwise, you're definitely encouraged to use any resources that you can. And if you're learning a new technology, definitely you can consider it as a part of the challenge. That's another question I remember that a lot of people are asking. But yeah, so PyBites, their course, I think the first 10 PyBites are free. And then if you decide, it's like a paid course where you can learn Python, which is amazing. And that'll be like also your 100 Days of Code journey. If you're interested in Python specifically. So yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to mention for sure. There was something else.
Well, how about we talk about the Slack chat? So you've mostly been based on Twitter, and that's still the main hub for 100 Days of Code, as I understand.
Right.
You also have a Slack channel, and you have a Discord channel, right?
Yeah. All of those you can find on the main website, the100daysofcode.com/connect. But on Slack, we now have around 3,000 people, I think. I can check. Just a sec.
Yeah. And how are people interacting on the Slack? Like, do you have regulars, or do people jump in when they have a question? What are the main things you find people discussing on there?
So there's just sometimes people like introduce themselves and talk about different things, random things, like the questions that may have. And we have pretty much a channel within our Slack. We have a channel for everything you might need. Like if you're stuck on a code problem, there's like ask for help. There's ask for feedback where you've completed something. There's let me just check, connect by tech, where people can connect by certain technology that you're using. There's Get Motivated channel where people just like put motivational stuff in, and share resources is a good one. So when you join, I think it kind of adds you to all of those channels by default, and then you can kind of like pick and choose whichever ones else you want. But I would say it's a good resource where you need a certain question answered, as opposed to Twitter. Sometimes it's kind of like you've tweeted something, somebody responded to it, and then it's lost forever in this like timeline. Um, so that's why we needed Slack, where conversations are more permanent. They're not super permanent because it's a free Slack. We're not paying for it, so only the 10,000 messages I think are saved, which is okay. Like I don't intend to like run the biggest archive on the internet, but it definitely
Discord,
helps.
just out of curiosity, Discord, we started using that a lot more. We still use Gitter, but like I created a Discord specifically for the top contributors,
Right.
18 top contributors. And one of the appeals of Discord, other than the fact that it's just a really, really well built app, it's really fast, is that there's no, it's not like a free tier where you have messages disappearing. So I guess I'm curious, like, what you think the benefits of Slack are versus
right.
anybody who wants to start up a community. Which one would you recommend they use at this point?
If you were to start a community, use Discord. If you were, in our case, I don't want like the first 3,000 people that have registered on Slack to just go off and like download another app, because the cost of switching is too high and nobody will do it. I think, well, on our Discord channel, what I have to do is to create those like sub channels in a more like in a better way, and then we gradually could, I think, move over there. But I don't know, like personally, I don't know how to make that efficient and how to like avoid duplication of content and how to avoid all of that inertia that's built up. And for me, like if I were to download another app or use it in the browser, it's kind of like just another app I have to run. Where for work, I'm running Slack. So that's kind of, that was the logic behind it. It's really hard to choose one of those platforms because there's always, I really like also Spectrum. That was an interesting one that recently came about from, I think, Max Stoiber, the guy who is behind Styled Components. I hope I got that correctly, everything of those connections. That's an interesting one because it's more like kind of like the Discuss, kind of like the freeCodeCamp forum where everybody can, everything is a link pretty much, and that's what missing in Slack, is that any perfectly answered question is kind of lost forever in this Slack world.
That was definitely a big motivation for us to focus our efforts more on the forum, because you answer a question one time and that question shows up in the search results and it's indexed by Google, and it just reduces the redundancy. That said, a lot of people want to have a unique answer to their specific question, and it feels really good to have somebody giving you exactly an answer to what you're asking, as opposed to your question's kind of similar to this. Which the freeCodeCamp forum, if you start to ask a question, it'll steer you toward questions that it thinks are similar. But it definitely, like the real-time nature of chat, there's like a kind of a hype and just a lot of buzz around having an instantaneous response from somebody.
Right. And I think we should try to dissuade ourselves from doing that, because it builds bad habits of, again, it's instant gratification. Like I don't need to, and that's why even on Twitter or on email, don't expect someone to respond to you right away. They will respond in their own time where they've scheduled it. And I think in some ways technology is kind of like ruining us in that sense, where like if I'm not getting an answer in like 1 hour, does that person hate me, or like do they have something against me? Like no, they just living their life. And same with those instant messages. And I think if you find yourself, I think you're doing it really well, but I'm speaking to the audience. If you find yourself being asked, or if somebody asks you the same question over and over, like let's say you go to freeCodeCamp meetup at yours in your city, and somebody keeps asking you the same question, it may be a good idea to put that answer into a form of a blog post and have like some sort of like your own domain / that blog post where you can kind of send people to, and if they have more questions, you can like ask the specific details or like answer the specific details about their question. But in this sense also, what you get is visibility of this answer for everybody on the internet, and that can help you, and that can help them, people who don't have access to you in particular, for example. Like I saw your article yesterday about deleting all of the old tweets, and I was like, this is probably a question that gets asked a lot. I'm like, this is a good idea to answer that.
Yeah. So let's briefly talk about the future of 100 Days of Code. What are some aspects of 100 Days of Code that you're really excited about? And
Mm-hmm.
what do you have in store for the remainder of 2018?
I don't have anything in particular in store, but I think we could definitely add some like learning paths for people that are like, you're just a beginner, you're doing this, or you're already on a different track, or you want to learn Python for this kind of stuff. So for us to have some sort of a way to give them some content, like, oh, this is what you can do, that they don't have to search for. That would be a good idea. Adding more languages would be another. And I have some other ideas as well on kind of like wrapping it all around that do the opposite platform, where I'm thinking of starting a podcast, ideally, where one of the topics will be 100 Days of Code, and where we can explore like learning to code in more depth. Um, that's kind of like on my list of things I would like to do.
I have an idea for you. Just take this with a grain of salt, because it would involve work on your part, but not work on mine. But it seems human psychology and motivation and habit formation and those different aspects of applied psychology.
Mm-hmm.
You could perhaps consider creating a book club, because I know a lot of people who are interested in willpower and how they can cultivate healthy habits and things like that. And a lot of it is domain independent, whether you're trying to learn to code, or whether you're trying to shape, or whether you're trying to write more and chronicle things, or meditate more, or whatever it is, sleep more, whatever it is that you need to do to make your life better, whether that's career-based or lifestyle-based. It seems like that reading, you could build a reading list, and then you could have kind of a book club. Like in October, we're going to be talking about this book, and November, we're going to be talking about this book. So everybody get this book and read it in advance of that. That's kind of like book clubs are as old as books are.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't been considering it, but if I can send a link somehow here, I'll send it to you in this chat that I'm seeing. So this is my kind of like a little newsletter that I'm sending out. I've only sent it a couple of times for now, but this is where I'm going to be building that. I think it's a good idea to kind of tie it with your idea of reading club, where I would announce the things we're reading in that one.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share that as well, in case anybody wants to sign up with that. I just signed up myself.
Now the pressure.
Yeah.
Actually, right. Good quality stuff.
I signed up to a ton. Oh, and somebody in the chat just said they love the book club idea. I signed up to a ton of email newsletters. It's a great way to I mean, the information just comes to you. And usually if I don't have time, I just archive it. It's not a big deal.
Right.
I basically treat my inbox. A lot of people ask me how I stay up on all the different things, because I get emails from Jason Kalinakis at This Week in Startups. He has like inside.com, and they have some great newsletters. Bruce Schneider has his cryptogram that comes out every month, and that talks about security related stuff. It's so convenient to just sign up for these people's newsletters and have the great information come directly to you.
Right.
And of course, I have my own email blast that goes out to everybody who signs up for FreeCodeCamp, and I'm going to start sending that out again soon. We're working on some infrastructural stuff.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's really like an underutilized medium for reaching out to people, is just sending emails. And I would encourage everybody who's watching this, if you're interested in building your reputation as a developer, blogging, podcasting, these are great ways to do it. And then you can also publicize your blogs and your podcasts by having an email list. And even if there are only like 100 people on that email list, and most of them are your relatives and friends who signed up, That's great. Yeah, because it's a low friction way for you to quickly kind of share stuff, and it's way more rich than Twitter. If you tweet stuff out, people are going to miss it.
Yeah.
If you're on Facebook, well, I for one don't even really use Facebook anymore unless I absolutely have to, and I think a lot of people,
Exactly.
by the way, they just downgraded all their user numbers in Europe. A lot of people in Europe have stopped using Facebook too. But yeah, like, sorry for the little digression. I don't mean to dig.
No, it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I would say, you know, having a regular mailing list would be great for other people. And I'm signed up for your email, Alex, and
Thank you.
Extremely jazzed to see what you send out. And if you have a book club, I happen to spend a tremendous amount of time running, and I listen to books while I run. I probably listen to 20 or 30 hours of audio content a week, like between all the different podcasts and all the audiobooks I listen to. So, you know, I'd be interested.
Yeah, audiobooks have been, I think, the #1 discovery for me this year. Like since I've started working, I've always had trouble of like actually reading books, as opposed to my time at college, where I had so much time, and audiobooks kind of filled that, where you have to walk for 500 meters, you have to hop on a bus, and you have to walk a kilometer, and then you ride by train, things like this. You can always listen to your audiobook. So this year has been like insane in terms of like me getting through books and fiction as well. Like I had the longest time I've had a lot of trouble reading fiction books, and I want to, like, sci-fi. I love that. I recently read or like listened to Dune, and I was like, wow, now I understand. This is amazing. So yeah, and also one little tip that I got from Wes Boss, who's our Canadian super popular developer.
Oh yeah, one of my heroes.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's actually teaching at he used to teach at one of the boot camps here, but unfortunately now no access, so we can just get his courses. But he is recommended on his podcast, Syntax FM. By the way, amazing podcast about web development. If you are going through a course or watching a video, try to watch it on 1.5x or 2x speed, because you will not lose any content. Like, I'm watching all the Udemy courses I'm taking at 2x speed, and I don't miss anything. Like, as a non-native English speaker, I thought I would be like, oh, this is too fast for me. But no, actually. And even when I'm watching on normal speed, you would assume that I can code and listen at the same time, but I can't. So there's no value for me to like watch it at this slow speed. So that's one of the super tricks, and you can double the amount of content you like get through and understand and like digest with that just little trick. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in as well. I listen to everything on double speed as well, and I found it dramatically. I mean, it cuts the amount of time you have to spend listening in half. You have to listen a little harder, so it keeps you more engaged in a normal conversation, right? And just like you said, I never attempt to listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook while I'm doing something else that uses my brain. If I'm trying to code or I'm trying to write an article or something, it's a fool's errand to multitask in that way. I think, you can multitask in the sense that you can run and listen to a podcast at the same time, but you can't like write and talk at the same time, or listen to somebody else and talk at the same time. So the human brain just seems to be well disposed to doing kind of unthinking activity and thinking activity in parallel, but not two thinking activities at the same time.
Exactly. So, I've recently found out, especially by having those, is that I can do any work around the house. Like, I can vacuum clean the apartment while listening to an audiobook, or sometimes I do the dishes. And usually it's like it takes a bit more time than I would want to. But if you're listening to an audiobook, it's kind of like the time you've already won, and you kind of like just go ahead with it. So it's also been like a great kind of influx of more time that I can spend on it. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and we're in a golden age of podcasts. I think that this is like the amount of incredible content that comes out in podcast form every week is just too much. You mentioned Syntax FM is great. I listen to that. I listen to Changelog. I listen to Software Engineering Daily, Code Newbie, Learn to Code with Me podcast. I don't want to leave out anybody else's podcast, but like Indie Hackers, And then, of course, like all the podcasts from prominent technologists and, tech news. Kara Swisher, Recode Decode is great. There's no shortage of content. You can run for like 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, and learn so much just with your headphones on. And New York Times, Washington Post, like all the major publications have great podcast versions. So I apologize for the protracted pitch, but if you're not listening to podcasts yet, you absolutely should. You should start listening immediately, and you should check out the freeCodeCamp podcast.
For sure.
We're going to definitely continue to ramp up. We're publishing one podcast every Monday, and I'd like to start publishing every Wednesday as well. So have at least 2 episodes a week for you all. And it's going to cover a lot of like stuff that doesn't require a lot of visual aid. So less, how to debug this, snippet of JavaScript, and more,
right.
How do I stay motivated while I'm learning, or how do I convince my boss that this technology decision is better than this one? Different situations like that. So.
That's interesting. I have just one question for you. It's kind of like multi-layered question. Could you tell us more about your running? Like, do you run every day? What time of day do you run? What's the distance, and how do you do it? Why you do it? It's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I am a creature of habit. I've read the Charles Duhigg book. I've read a lot of books about habit formation and willpower. And so every day I wake up with my kids wake me up. Basically, they start crying, "Come and get me out of bed." So I grab my little infants. I grab one under each arm, walk them downstairs, get them breakfast, change their diaper, or change my son's diaper. My daughter is potty trained now. And then after everybody's ready and everybody eats breakfast, I've been skipping breakfast. I basically am doing what's called intermittent fasting, where I don't eat 16 hours a day. And I've been losing about 1 pound every 2 weeks as a result of this. So
nice.
I've been doing it like 10 or I don't know why it works, but it seems to work. I eat, just whatever. I'm not really doing anything diet wise, but I'm not eating breakfast anymore. And I'm not eating snacks after dinner. So then I just after I get to school, and I go directly to the YMCA, and I just run laps around that for about an hour. And then I come home and work. And then after my kids go to sleep, sometimes there's a lake nearby, and I just run around the lake. So, anywhere between 5 and 10 hours a week spent running.
Wow.
I'll run about 10K.
You've probably read this book, but if you haven't, Haruki Murakami is one of the Japanese authors. So he has a book, and he's an avid runner as well. He has a book called "What I'm Talking About When I'm Talking About Running," or something like that, or "What I Talk About When I Talk About Running." Amazing. And I think
I'll check that out. That's the second time this week that somebody recommended it to me. So
wow,
I'm definitely going to give it now.
Run a lot, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I'm serious. Even if you don't create that book club, that list of books, put that together into an article, and I'll include that because, we could just put it on the headline like, the 100 Days of Code, how the creator of 100 Days of Code sticks with habits, his reading list, something like that. And it sounds like you're discovering new books all the time that kind of cover these different topics. But, like the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance for the 2018, people living in that year. That kind of list, I think, would be super helpful. And, like that kind of category was often called like self-help or something like that. But I just want to make it clear, like, these aren't like motivational business books the way that, like, I think those kind of books get kind of a bad rap. A lot of these are applied psychology type books. Yes, some of them could probably be summarized in a couple pages of bullet points, but I think that there's a lot of value in reading them, and I've read a lot of them. And I definitely think it's worth, paying $10-15 to download a book and listen to it, or to order a used copy for like $1 or $2 on eBay and have it delivered to your door. And I think that just the process of reading these books and thinking about how they apply to your own life is incredibly valuable. So, even if you dispute like the scientific, veracity and the methodology behind how they came to these conclusions. Just reading it and thinking about it is a helpful practice, in my opinion. So I would encourage everybody to give these a try and be relatively open-minded about it. So just one last question for you, Alex.
Yep.
If people want to know what's going on in the world of Alexander Kallaway, the Canadian, who moved from Russia, learned a program, got a developer job, and is now helping so many people, thousands of people, stay motivated in their efforts to become developers themselves. If people want to follow you, what would be the best way for them to keep tabs on you and your actions?
I think Twitter is the best way, and now this little newsletter that I'm gonna, because what if like Twitter goes down, in a couple of years? But it's probably not gonna happen. So I usually use Twitter at Kallaway, and instead of LL, it's 11, so KA11 away. That's the best way. Because I'm also usually not on Facebook. I use it just to either create or monitor events for freeCodeCamp Toronto. But otherwise, I don't really have a use for it. So yeah, definitely Twitter is the best way.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody who tuned
Thank you.
in.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great talking to you again. I had a blast hanging out with you in Toronto.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Next time I'm in Toronto, I definitely want to hang out and get another A&W root beer float with you.
Yeah, and you won't have to do Airbnb. You can live with us.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I see in the background you got a happy birthday kind of strung across. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, it's been I guess I should have taken it down by now, but on 8th of June it was my wife's birthday. And just because it looks nice with the heart, like the heart stays there. It's kind of like little bulbs, and it's kind of like around it has happy birthday. So yeah, it's
Very
like
cool.
Yeah.
Well, a belated happy birthday to your wife Anna.
I'll tell her for sure. Oh, by the way, she's learning to code as well. She has finally succumbed.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we're gonna be like a developer family.
That's great, man. Well, I hope you all have a beautiful weekend together. I hope you all get plenty of coding in, and you get plenty of exercise. And
yeah, you've inspired me to start running. I'm gonna run soon. Yeah, for sure.
Good book on running that is both motivational and kind of instructive is called I think it's called Born to Run, like the song. But it talks about 4-foot running, where you run on your 4 feet instead of like most people run on their heels. And if you do that, it kind of like hurts your knees. Like a lot more of the impact is absorbed by your knees. If you run on kind of the balls of your feet, most of it's absorbed by the tendons in your lower leg. So that was one of the big breakthroughs that allowed me at 37. I started running probably, seriously when I was about 30. But already by then, my knees were kind of like giving me grief after I'd go run. But ever since I switched to running on my 4 feet, I've had no problem. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't run. My knees are bad." I would encourage them. I'm not saying that like, no, your legs are fine. Just go do it. If you're having serious issues with your legs, I would definitely go talk to a doctor about it, or maybe a kinesthesiologist or something. But I would definitely encourage, before you dismiss running as an activity, try running on the balls of your feet. And it's a little unnatural when you first start, and your strides are a lot shorter and you take strides a lot faster. I've got like a playlist of like 180 BPM music that I listen to when I run. But it really does work, and I have had basically zero leg pain since I started doing that. And I do, at one point I was doing like 100 kilometers a week. So yeah.
That's a lot.
All right. Well, hey,
definitely check out that book. Thank you for the recommendation. Yeah.
Have a beautiful weekend. And hey, everybody who's watching, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Happy coding, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.